and regret to say that we're in the worst economic mess since the Great Depression. We must go forward with a tax relief package. I shall ask for a 10% reduction across the board in personal income tax rates for each of the next 3 years. Proposals will also be submitted for accelerated depreciation allowances for business to provide necessary capital so as to create jobs.
A new study published in a psychology magazine exposes specifically how neoliberalism not only has led to inequality in America, but the impact it has had on our mentality toward inequality. And it's really fascinating, but not good news. So a team of researchers over at New York University and the American University of Beirut performed an analysis of roughly 20 years of data from more than 160 countries and found that the dominance of neoliberalism across social and economic institutions has ingrained a widespread acceptance of income inequality across our value systems in turn. So how exactly do the researchers define neoliberalism? I know that word gets thrown around a lot. It's important to understand what it means. And more importantly, in this methodology, how did they define it? The researchers defined neoliberalism as the dominant socioeconomic approach at the root of privatization, abolition of the welfare state, and curtailment of redistributive programs, which has dominated from the 1970s, which by the way, that's when our wages began to become stagnant, to present day. They measured the strength of a nation's neoliberalism using the Economic Freedom Index, a metric crafted by the Fraser Institute, a Canadian libertarian think tank, which measures items like size of government, regulation of business, credit, and labor, and freedom to trade internationally. So what they did is evaluate the psychological impact of neoliberalism on the people living under that system. And what they noticed was that people who live under a neoliberalist society tend to go from thinking of things like in a way, like as in like solidarity, or looking at things like inequality as something that's unfair, to suddenly kind of justifying it, focusing on how things happen because we live in a meritocracy. Things are merit-based, right? All these pretty little lies that people tell themselves to justify the insane inequality in society. So they evaluated psychological attitudes toward inequality using results from the World Values Survey taken roughly every 4 years, which asked respondents globally direct questions about their agreement with statements like, we need larger income differences as incentives for individual effort, and incomes should be made more equal. And one more graphic I need to read to you so you guys fully understand what the findings were. So their analysis found a correlation between the embrace of neoliberalism and the prominence of what social psychology scholars call equity-based reasoning, or a preference for merit over a preference for equality. The line of thinking in which material outcomes like payment, wealth, and social status should be proportional to inputs like productivity, effort, ability, and time. And Cenk, it reminded me of another study that we talked about years and years ago on the show, where the scientists had the participants in the study play a game. I think it was like Monopoly or something, but they actually made it abundantly clear to the participants that the game was rigged in favor of some of the participants, and the participants knew that it was rigged in their favor. So they ended up winning because it was rigged in their favor. And in the end, they felt that they earned it anyway. It was amazing.
Yeah, they were so proud, and they were positive that they had merited it, and that the other people who were at a disadvantage, and they all knew they were not worthy of winning. And that's the part that is really maddening. Look, I hate the word neoliberal because if you're not in politics, the word liberal doesn't mean anything anymore. It's so confusing. It means basically corporate policies, okay? And so in this case, there's two things that are really important. There's studies saying, well, if you live in a neoliberal or corporate world, basically, you're told all of these things in this mythology. And does it actually affect you? Of course it affects you. Number one, it becomes your assumptions. Like, you don't even realize it. When you're a kid, they tell you, okay, this is the world you live in, and they tell you about this myth of meritocracy and how the people who work really hard, and by the way, it does happen sometimes. So I don't want you to get discouraged. It does happen sometimes, but overall, the idea that the really rich always deserved it is absurd. Most of them inherited it. I mean, they're literally the least deserving people on the planet, right? But you're told nonstop that they have merit, and that the people who were born poor don't have merit. Wait a minute, they were born poor. They didn't. What did they do? Why are you blaming them? But since it's the assumptions that are told to everybody, you don't know that you're being brainwashed, which leads to the most important element, which at least this summary left out. The media. The media is the one that tells you these myths. Who's telling you? You see it on the news, you see it in popular culture, etc. right? The entire corporate media is supposed to influence you. And it influences you in a pro-corporate direction. Again, almost all the major media players, and there's massive media consolidation in the country. Thanks a lot, Bill Clinton, he did that. And he worked with the Republicans to do that. And so they've all become these mega, multi-billion-dollar corporations, and they get most of their money from advertising, which are other mega, multi-billion-dollar corporations. And those corporations are basically paying them to do marketing for them, almost literally. And part of the marketing is the content. So they keep telling you about, oh, corporations are great and you should bow your head, obey, obey, obey. Hey, the politicians look like they're getting millions of dollars from those same corporations and doing whatever they want. No, they're honest, principled legislators who are having debates, and they have all these principles that they want to. No, it's all a lie. It's all a mirage. And by the way, that's also driving people to the right wing. I literally talked to someone who was in our audience just the other day. He started out as a right winger, and he said, well, the reason I went in that direction is because it was so obvious that what the media was saying isn't true. These politicians aren't great people, and they're not honorable, and we're all getting screwed, etc. So I went looking for answers, and the right wing was attacking the media, and I thought, oh, I guess they must be right. And then he watched us and realized, oh my God, no, they're not at all right. They don't have any of the facts. And then finally, the thing that annoys me about a lot of this stuff is it's always painted as either or. You're either gonna get equality or you're gonna get a system based on merit. No, that's obviously not correct in either way. You have to have balance where we have enough equality, and definitely equality of opportunity, so that we all have a shot at having merit, enough merit that it gets us the results we want. We hate this system because it doesn't give us a shot. We don't have equality, not of results, but of opportunity, so that we have a shot at getting rich as well, that everybody does. I'm not like, if the currently rich folks hadn't rigged the system so no one else could break in, then I'd say, okay, great, I'm glad they're rich, and I hope we get rich, and etc. But we gotta have a shot, and we don't have a fair chance anymore because the system is rigged by the rich and maintained by the corporate media.